Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm doing my presentation in English. It's being recorded because I love this talk so much. I wanted to send it to other people and share it with others as well. But if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask it in Dutch. So the title of my talk is Learning at Lightning Speed. And I was going to talk about Infi-Con and Infi-Con's first common theme and the fact that I'm the first child. But Daniel already did this for me, so you already know, which is great because I now have more time for my content. But first, let me ask you, what is the basis for all this technology, right? That was the thing I had in mind when I was trying to decide what kind of presentation I was going to give. So there's various things that go at the basis of technology projects. A great office and great office management, which we have, which is fine, which is nice, but I don't have much to tell you about that. Customers, very important, of course, but I think the projects are also about the customers. Agile, but Agile is dead, right? Dave Thomas has a great talk at GoTo 2015 if you want to see why Agile is dead. So I decided to talk about learning new things, because that's really the basis for doing technology projects in its truest form, I think. But first, a little bit about me. I am a busybody. I had to look this up. In Dutch, I would say I am a professioneel bemoeial. I try to do all sorts of different things, technology-wise, but also organizing this kind of thing. And that means, oh, by the way, I'm also a cook. This is important. Try to remember this is important for later. But I'm mainly a jack of all trades. I try to learn all sorts of different skills and be busy with all sorts of different technologies. And that means that I have tried to perfect the art of learning. I have tried to be as efficient and as good as possible in learning something new. And today I want to share this way I do this with you. Okay, so I have this little framework. This is, at first this was descriptive about how I would learn, and then I made it into a more prescriptive form so I could share it with others. Before I dive into this, there's a few caveats. I am not hindered by any theoretical knowledge at all. I don't know jacks about learning things in a theoretical sense. I have not a master's degree in this thing. I have looked up the basic stuff, so you have, for example, visual learning, auditory learning, kinesthetic learning, and so forth. And there's all sorts of generic divisions, but I wanted to talk about learning in technology. And it's my own framework, and you can use it however you see fit. The second thing is it's within a certain kind of division. I would say it's about active learning. So I cannot tell you much about how to read a book, right? That's easy. Anyone can hopefully read a book. This is about active learning, so being busy with the thing you're trying to learn, trying to practice and so forth. Okay, so a bonus. I said it's grew out of learning new technology, but it's also useful outside of tech if you're not in tech, for example. My goal here today is to inspire you all to learn in new and different ways, to try to go home and the next time you try to learn a library or so forth, that you do that in a new way. Okay, so onto the framework. This is what it looks like. At the center is you. Any one of you, because if you have 0 or more skills, you are a jack of all trades. That's at least my definition. So, I'm going to go through this ring of activities you can do to learn new things in an active way. But first I want to talk about this ring that's blocking you from actually learning. And that's what I would say is a ring of empathy. You need to be empathic towards others, towards students, towards library authors, maintainers, and so forth. You need to think about what their context is to be able to effectively learn yourself. So that's really center of this presentation. And when I go over all of them, I will mention how I see this fits in a concrete manner. A little bit about conscientiousness. I'm a very conscientious person, which according to Wikipedia means I'm careful or diligent, kind of fits. By the way, I'm also not a criminal and apparently not antisocial, although I might disagree. If you are not conscientious, you can invert the statement, of course, and you're probably a criminal. But the note is here because my framework and my way of learning, active learning, works best if you're trying to focus, if you're conscientious about what you're doing, if you're diligent about it. Okay, so let's talk satellites, right? The ring of satellites. First way of learning, active learning, is writing tests. And you are not testing the library, you're not testing the technology you're trying to learn, you're not trying to test the skill you're trying to attain, but you are testing your assumptions about this. Let that sink in for a short while. You're testing your own assumptions about how something works. How does that work with cooking, for example? I've been making bread recently, and this is sort of an integration test of bread. So what you see here is various toppings on the bread, and the front one has garlic butter, and my assumption was that all sorts of toppings would work. Garlic butter on a hamburger bun tastes awful. Don't try it. But the other ones did work, so I learned something profound about meticulously testing all these things. And with technology, we have like the perfect tooling to do this, right? You have unit testing frameworks, which you can use for integration tests as well. So if I'm trying to learn a library, I will write this kind of test. The bottom one says that you can serialize an object that is circular with to a JSON format. And in fact, my assumption that this could be done by default is wrong. So what I would do is invert my assertion, and then I would write a second test that's similar and try to rearrange the preconditions so that the assertion will start to succeed. And along the way, I have learned more profoundly about this test than when I would just poke my neighbor and ask them how to do this. So empathy here is very important because it will unveil the biases that are hurting your assumptions. If you are only thinking about what you want to do with this technology, you will get stuck in this little context of your own. But if you think about how the library is meant to be used, or if you think about how others are using it, you will more profoundly learn how to use this technology. And this holds for technology as well as cooking. Try to think of why a recipe came to be and how it's meant to be done, and what the meaning behind it is. So be empathic to how others use the technology or meant it to be used as well. Second thing, asking questions. And with questions, it's very cliche, I'm sorry, you learn from the journey, not the destination. Everyone's looking for answers all the time, but it's what you learn along the way that's really helping you learn something profound. The answer itself, is usually not so important unless you're trying to get a production bug fixed, of course. So how does that work with cooking? For example, I had this question, this recipe said you should place potatoes on rock salt when you put them in the oven. I was thinking, why would you do this, right? And I could just get the answer from someone and they would tell me, but when I tried to research my own answer and I was asking the question in a profound manner, you would find out all sorts of different things about the effects of salt on food and how the oven works and so forth and so forth. And then you learn far more profoundly. And the same thing holds for technology questions. If you ask a question, you don't need to actually ask it, but you need to write the question. You need to think about the question. And what this turns into, when I ask this question, it turns into this, which is like this huge chunk of text, but try to conscientiously cut it into pieces. And what happens is along the way, I learn all sorts of things about workarounds and about other edge cases that are related to mine. Again, empathy here is very important because, well, the bottom one, of course, if you're asking someone a real question, you're going to actually ask it. You're going to be asking for their time, which is really precious commodity, right? So prevent wasting other people's time. That's an altruistic reason to be empathic. But it's also for your own good. If you close the gap towards yourself and the person you're asking the question from, then if you're making efforts to close that gap, it's more likely that you're going to get the answer, and it's also more likely that you're going to learn something by stepping out of your own context. Third one, issues, and then I talk about issues if you have a problem with a technology or a skill. Same thing, and it looks a lot like questions, and sometimes a question turns into an issue. My advice is, if you're trying to learn something, start with tests, then go to questions, and if you are very sure that you found an issue, and not just it works on my PC problem or it doesn't work on my PC problem, that's when you move to issues. And if you start to log an issue for a library, that's when you can learn, I think. For example, here, this is started as a question: how can you make a palindrome cocktail? I don't know how many people have tried to make a palindrome cocktail before. Ah, nice, one person, amazing. We should talk afterwards as well. So the top ones, I ran into problems, and my question slowly turned into this issue, because the bottom one does look like it succeeded, but it's really an awful jello shot with frozen strawberry liquor in between. It's also horrible. But I learned a lot along the way about techniques to do this and so forth. Issues with libraries and technology is the same thing. This is for some small little repository. Altruistic reason to be empathic is again in the top right. Maintainers spend a lot of time in their technologies that they're offering. Try to show them some love, at least on things like GitHub. Maybe not so much on Stack Overflow, because they like things to be sterile. And you would think, well, where is the learning in this, right? It's very short. So where's the learning here? Well, let's see. I said I would be happy to make a pull request if you like the idea. And there's a lot underlying that, because I tried to fix my own problem and tried to make an ad hoc style sheet to do what I wanted. And that's why I said I could offer a pull request. And along the way, you learn something about the technology, right? If you're just going to throw the issue there, then it's going to probably waste everyone's time, and you're not going to learn anything. So empathy is going to be similar here as well. Again, don't waste other people's time. That's the altruistic reason to be empathic. But the second one is it helps you find workarounds. It helps you find solutions. So if you run into a problem during your project, even if it's on the project you're doing, at Infi we do an hourly invoicing system. So our customers are paying for this, so you need to be conscientious about this. My customer is even in the room here today. But I would still say that this is a good way to spend your time on a project, because if you're writing the issue about the library you're using and you're writing it in a conscientious, diligent manner, you will find a solution, a proper solution for what you're trying to do. And that's more beneficial to everyone, especially yourself, but also for the project you're working on. Fourth one, and you see there's kind of a natural flow. This is repros, reproducible scenarios. So this is about finding your own resolution. You're trying to write down the steps of how you got to your issue or your question. You can use them for future reference. So if you have all those steps, you can use them in new issues and new questions and new tests that you're trying to write. And you will also get a quicker resolution from others. So it's benefits everywhere. It takes time. But apart from time part thing, it's benefits everywhere. So here, for example, I'm trying to make limoncello, and I knew there was going to be an issue with this. So what I did is I meticulously wrote down all the steps and made photographs and so forth, because I knew in the end this lemon habanero would be too spicy or not spicy enough to my own taste. And then I had this set of steps, and then if I want to do it again, I can really follow my own instructions and tweak where I need to get my own resolution. So to me this is super obvious, but if you write an issue on GitHub or so forth, and it's possible, try to write a reproducible scenario. So for example, here on the left-hand side, I write the markdown you should put into Ghost to get this weird spacing here. And if you do this, you will probably find a workaround along the way for yourself. You will not waste someone else's time, and they will be quicker to help you as well if you don't find your own solution. So empathy here is helping you to find the key bits of your problem, because you cannot write, well, if you're going to make a repro, first be born, right? And then go to school, and then learn this, and then that's going to be too long. No, you have to identify the key bits, and that's really an important skill, knowing what your actual problem is and what's important to close the gap between what you know and what the people that are trying to help you know. So this has a net positive result for yourself as well, because along the way you will find the steps that are needed to reproduce a problem or a thing, and you can reuse that later as well. So the fifth one, this is, we're getting to my more favorite stuff, right? So examples. People would say about examples, I'll quickly throw one together. That's horrible. That's absolutely horrible, because examples should be exemplary. If you take anything away from my presentation, think about this. If you make an example for someone, make sure it's exemplary. Make sure that all the important bits about the thing you're trying to demonstrate are there. Because otherwise, especially if there's other people that have a different context, they will not know how to interpret and use your example. Let me give you an example. So I asked myself, what are the classic ingredients for sauce bolognese? And then I went along the wheel of my framework and ended up creating an entire example. So what I did as a slightly overly conscientious person, I wrote down this spreadsheet with all the ingredients from various recipes and also an authentic source of the mamas of North Italy. And then I kind of averaged all the ingredients and found what the canonical recipe would be for a sauce bolognese. And in the end, you get like a perfect example of what a classic sauce bolognese would taste like. And my message to you is, if you're trying to be diligent about creating your examples for others, but also for yourself, you will learn a lot along the way. And that's the important part of this satellite. Okay, so in technology, this translates really well because GitHub or GitLab or whatever is your friend for posting such examples. And here's an example I made in the past on how to use a specific OAuth library. And I didn't really publish this at first to people except internally. But as you can see, it just attracts stars. And I didn't quite publish it anywhere, but it's just because it's exemplary, this is what it looks like. It doesn't need to be nice, right? I'm trying to be exemplary in how to use the library. It doesn't need to be pretty in this specific instance, unless that's what you're trying to show an example of. So you have all the various buttons to try out the library and the technology, and then if I encountered a different issue with this technology along the way, I would just go back to my exemplary example and I would start pushing the buttons in a certain order, and then I would find out really quickly what the thing is I'm trying to accomplish and how you should do this. Okay, so empathy here is very important because it will help you create more diverse and complete examples. If you're trying to make an example that you would want, that's also kind of nice, but then you're looking in your own circle. If you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of another person, what would they want from your example? Even if you're not intending to publish, if you think about what others would get from your example, you will create a more diverse example. And you will learn along the way. You will not be stuck in your own bubble, but you will learn about the various things that are possible with such a technology. Sixth one, if you want to get good at something, start teaching it. And let me show you by example. This is a friend of mine who's actually also in the room asked me how to create a brain hemorrhage cocktail, which tastes about as similar as it looks. It goes in your mouth and it doesn't mix well, and then you swirl it around. But it's actually also kind of nice because it's sweet and so forth. Okay, so not about the example. I just said, yes, I can teach you how to do this, even though I couldn't. Because, going back a slide, if you want to get good at something, start teaching it, right? So you need to start thinking about what are the steps to do this? What is the curriculum, so to say? What kind of things would people need to know to build this? And then you have automatically this kind of training path laid out for yourself along this technology or skill. And the same thing we do at Infi a lot with dojos, where we will just plan a dojo, where we start giving a dojo, for example, .NET Core, when it was quite new. We just held a dojo where other people could come in, and we weren't teachers of this subject matter, but the fact that you promise other people to start teaching it will push you to learn in a specific way, in new and different ways. So that's a really great way to learn a new technology as well as other kinds of skills. Empathy here makes you a better teacher, because if you put yourselves in the shoes of another person that is going to use your training or your workshop, then you will think about what do they need instead of only the things that are in your own circle. And it will also make you a better student, I think, if you teach something and you do it consciously, very, very focused manner, then you will become a better student as well as a better teacher, and you will learn more along the way. So, the final one is exploring. And this is kind of the gateway, I would say, to the other 6 options you have. So, it's also kind of my least favorite, because I can not as much put my focus into it, and it's more of a creative process. But then again, most humans are pretty good as well. So unless you're failing the Turing test, this is probably good for you. It's the gateway to the other 6 satellites. So what you do is you're probably not sure about one of the 6, that you're not sure about what test should I write or what should I do next. So you just go about and see what's there around the technology. For example, I found this very interesting question: is it possible to cook a whole fish in the dishwasher? So I thought, well, that was fun. This is the exploring part, it's over. And what I would do next is start creating a reproducible scenario. So I write down what I use sea salt and Ziploc bags, and how I portion the fishes, and how I wrap them in plastic and so forth, what kind of fish I used, how I place them in the dishwasher, and you can create an entire meal for your family if you want to, using this. And I also, of course, very important, this is at 70 degrees. Now that I know, I would recommend more 65 or maybe even 50 if you're trying to live on the dangerous side with salmonella and so forth. 137 minutes, that's a little too much, so if you can stop it in between, that's nice, but you need to know where the heat of your cycle is. Okay, I'm rambling a little bit, but it works, really. You can get actual fish cooked, and it tastes horrible, although my wife said when I was preparing that it actually kind of tasted okay. So I guess if you tweak, and if you know your dishwasher really well, if you have an intimate relationship with it, you can do this. But the exploring part, that's what I'm trying to say. Be conscious when you're exploring, and be conscious when you found something nice, and then dive into a question or a test or a reproducible example or something like that. And with technology, it's very similar, because, for example, TC39, finally, as JavaScript developers, we're going to get private variables. Amazing, I know, right? So this is still experimental in most browsers, I think. And I'm exploring the way this feature works by this is the ugliest syntax I think there is, just about. Maybe template functions are uglier. Anyways, this is a private variable, and then I start tweaking around with it, and soon this will go into a question or an issue with how this proposal works, or maybe an example, so others can also learn how this works. And that's what I mean by consciously exploring. You move along the space of the thing you're trying to learn, and then you pick something, and then there is where you start doing one of the other 6 things. Empathy here is important because it's very nice to explore your own comfort zone. I would recommend you also explore other people's comfort zones. If you just stick within your own bubble, you're not going to learn as much as when you're trying to think about what are others doing with this technology, how are they using it, and then once you found something interesting, bite yourself into this, and then go into one of the other 6 ways of learning. Okay, so in summary, these are the 6 ways that I particularly use to study in a focused manner. And try to find the ways that appeal to you. Try to pick the ones that appeal to you, and start fiddling around with this. Try to really focus into learning in one of these ways. And if you're unsure which one to use, you can start by exploring and just put this on the wall and know when you're switching from one to the other. The enablers of all this, again, are empathy and conscientiousness. So you need to be diligent about doing this stuff. Otherwise, I think it won't work as good as it does, although you must tweak, of course, according to what kind of person you are. But empathy is a blocker. If you don't have empathy for, and then not necessarily even the altruistic version, and not necessarily the feelings one, but the empathy of other people's context. What do they know about a technology? How are they using it? Which is usually readily available in text form on the internet as well. If you do this, if you put yourselves in the shoes of others, all these 7 items are going to work so much better for you. Okay, so in summary, this is the framework. I think they go from small to slightly larger. Remember that this ring of empathy is blocking you if you don't take action there, and in the middle is going to be you, the jack of all trades. So with a little room to spare, thank you very much for listening.